For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, the Lost Chapter.
Man, I gotta tell you, of all the cool awesomeness that is GenCon, the one bad thing for me is that their Dunkin' Donuts closed like 2 years ago.
I know. It was that cool old
I've
classic.
been needing this iced coffee for like a week and a half.
I know. You know, it's just, they don't have the same kind of donut shops we have. You know, they have a lot of cool
No,
stuff,
they don't.
but
They have
donut
the
shops-
Tim Hortons, which is like the Canadian version of Dunkin' Donuts. And it
I'm
just,
sorry,
it's not
Canadians, not as good.
Not the same.
Not the
same. So, iced coffee.
Yes. Large iced tea with lemon, a nice Boston cream donut.
Can't get that anywhere else. But anyway, well, here's the deal.
Yes.
Folks that are listening to our voices right now.
Yes.
Once again, our schedule we're all back to normal. Everything's back to normal starting this week.
Yeah.
But there's this one last thing we got to do. This one little bit of paperwork, if you will, to catch up. And that is this lost chapter with no third chair.
Right. That's okay.
And we were just looking at our schedule. We were just looking at our recording schedule. We've got everything lined up. We literally have guests lined up into November. We're all set and ready to go. We just realized that because of our recording schedule over the summer, we are not going to talk about GenCon at any length until like late September.
Right. Which is just, we got to change that. So we're going to try to get back to, recording in a more timely to the release date.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we did it so we could all have a vacation,
Right.
which I don't think anybody begrudged us, but it's time to get back on track.
Right. So anyway, so this is an opportunity for you, our Patreon supporters and our Libsyn supporters, to hear our GenCon thoughts ahead of when everybody else will. So you'll hear them. We're recording this literally the Wednesday after GenCon.
Yeah.
And
So we've only been home for literally 2 days.
And it'll be going live shortly after the next episode. So it'll be going live inside of 2 weeks. So you'll hear this just around the end of August. So it'll be less than a month between GenCon and this going live. So hopefully it'll be sort of fresh. And get you some fresh feedback on that, and you'll get some of our early thoughts, some of the games we got to play, and some of these games will be games we're going to review later in the season, and you'll get sort of a little peek into what's coming, if you will.
And many of them we are not going to review.
Right.
And this is where we're going to be able to talk to them while they're still fresh in our minds. Because in the GenCon review episode, you're probably going to hear a lot of this, but you're not going to hear as much detail because I guarantee you in 2 weeks I'm going to have forgotten pretty much everything I did at GenCon.
So this is so for you, our biggest supporters, you get the inside scoop from GenCon.
Our impressions of GenCon
So I think the way
2014.
the way to do this, Craig, is just go from the starting night and Wednesday night for both of us, I think.
Yep.
And then just work through the weekend in a reasonably patterned approach and paced approach so we can get this wrapped up in about 40 minutes.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So Wednesday, we both drove this year, right?
Yep.
And we both got in, in fact, we both got in with minutes of each other. It was kind of funny.
We did not drive. We drove in separate cars, separate routes even.
Yep.
Not different itineraries, left at different times.
Yep.
It was craziness because we literally pulled into the JW Marriott parking lot bumper to bumper.
Yes, it was kind of funny.
It was quite intriguing.
And we had driven separately this year. My family went. For the first time, I brought my girls down. So there was the entire Wakeland clan, and they're both excited and nervous. They couldn't wait. And so I was very concerned that it would live up to their expectations because I knew they expected it to be big. I knew they expected to be a lot of games, but you don't know, with a 12-year-old, 10-year-old, are they going to walk in there and be like, after 10 minutes, okay, done? Or are they going to, what's the reaction going to be? So I'm a little nervous going into this. Craig's traveling with the normal crew. He's in bachelor mode, and we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
So we pull in. Our first order of business after getting checked in and set up in the JW Marriott there was to hook up in the evening with the folks from Geek Nation Tours and have a nice dinner with
their customary organizational get-to-know-you dinner at the beginning of a tour.
Yes, and it was excellent. Terrace this year went to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, right?
Delicious.
Very, very good steak. A delicious private room, chock full of Geek Nation Tour people, about 30 some odd folks there.
30 people, and a bunch of industry guests.
Yeah, we had Garrett Wong, who was on the show, and we had, of course, Terrace was there, and Jeff Engelstein and his kids were there. Tom Vassell and Eric Summerer from the Dice Tower Network were there. I forget the
Poor
lovely,
Stephen Bonacore was there.
Stephen Bonacore was there. The lovely cosplay lady was there.
And her manager.
And and her manager. I'm totally forgetting her name, and I apologize. But we had a great time. And the best part was, so Terrace had assigned seating. We were all spread out so that his different members of his tour were sitting next to different micro celebrities, if you will.
And one actual celebrity.
I had a great opportunity to sit next to a lovely couple from Louisiana. They were awesome. And Nicole and I were sitting next to them, and they were fantastic. And another couple from nearby who had driven down, and we just had a great conversation. It was really, really nice. It was great and it turned out they were all huge fans of the D6G, which was nice to hear, and they had some very nice things to say. And of course, Nicole said, "Hey, who's that behind you?" And there's this guy sitting behind us, and his shirt, he's got a T-shirt on, and on the back it says, "The D6G Viva La Pole Reunion Tour 2014," and it lists Craig and myself and Nicole and all the people on the back of his shirt. I'm like, that's got to be Phil. And sure enough, it was Phil from the UK, the man keeping the Viva La Pole joke alive
all this time.
All these years. So it was fantastic to meet
He had
Phil
finally
as well.
made it to GenCon.
So it was one of the highlights of the weekend for me, Craig, because not only was it a fantastic meal hosted by Terrace, and I got to sit, with the Star Trek celebrity, as well as, the other great podcasters like Tom Vassell and Eric Summerer and Stephen Bonacore there from Stronghold Games. But really, the highlight of it was there were so many D6G fans there, and it was so nice to have a nice, just quiet dinner with them all and really chat with everybody. It was really, really, and everybody was so complimentary and very, very nice, and it really was one of the highlights of the whole
I
weekend.
sat at a table with a German listener and a couple listeners from England, one from Australia, a really, really nice guy. Well, actually, a very nice couple, and a guy from America. And you're listening, and I know you're listening, and because of the temperament that you showed me, I know you're smiling because you realize that I can't remember names at all. Next year I'm going to take notes. I'm just going to walk around with a notebook because I feel like such a schlub because everybody treated us so awesome and we played games with these people. I had a huge game of Werewolf going on that night.
Yes.
We had over 20 people playing Werewolf in a private room in a Ruth's Chris steakhouse. It was awesome.
And then meanwhile, while you were doing that, Jeff Engelstein was desperately trying to teach me this sort of 8-bit video game shooter thing. It was kind of like Galaga, the board game, almost like he had his little spaceship. But he had just picked it up from the Z-Man booth and hadn't even learned the rules. So it was more of us. We basically punched all the components, got on the table, figured out like one half of one turn, and that was it.
Right. But it was time to go.
But it was great. It turned out to be the only time I really got to hang out with the Engelsteins that weekend. It just the rest of the weekend didn't line up.
Oh, it was really busy.
They had so many things lined up. We had so many things lined up. So it was great to have that little quiet moment, not only with the fantastic listeners and Terrace, but also these other podcasters as well, because I love to sync up with folks that you know virtually and you kind of chat with all the time and you feel like you know them, but you don't ever see them except at these conventions. So it was nice to have that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And then after the dinner, we all walked back to the hotel and everybody sort of separated. But I went on to play Luchador a bunch later on that night with Phil and a bunch of guys from England, and I think one from Australia, and I think one from America. And again, I'm going to take notes next year.
Nice. So then Thursday comes. Now, Thursday is always a big day at GenCon because Thursday is the day that the convention hall opens up, the vendor hall, if you will, which, of course, is massive. And now, the other challenge is that unlike every other convention on the planet, I don't know why GenCon does this, but they do, press passes are not mailed out. Press pass, you have to go to the press pass room and pick them up on Thursday morning. I don't know why. All the other conventions, PAX East, everybody else mails them out. GenCon does not. So you got to stand in this line, and then it's always mobbed because of the press pass people. The first 100 get a little ticket that lets them get in the vendor hall an hour early as if they were a VIG, very important gamer.
Yeah.
The idea here is now
we have done this every year since they offered this service.
Right, yes. And this is the first year that you've had to actually be aggressively there early. Yeah. And the line was longer than I remember it. So I don't know if
it was longer than it's ever been before, which makes sense because they said general attendance at GenCon was 15% over last year.
Yes.
Almost broke 60,000.
Yes.
So the press was commensurately larger. However, couple gripes, and I'm being honest.
Here we go.
These are my Patreon.
It's okay. It's the Lost Chapters. Only our patrons are here.
Okay.
With a few Libsyn folks.
Every guy with a 2-bit blog can get one of these press passes, and so we're in line, and it's a long line, and it was longer before because 100 people got in and got out to go to the hall. So for the first time ever, we didn't get into the hall, and they were literally, there are rules. Just like in games, and rules are, meant to be followed. And one of the rules is 3 months ago was the deadline for filling out all of your information to get a press pass. Mm-hmm. They were letting people fill those forms out in line. Yeah. Which is one of the reasons this line went so slowly. So this was the first year that I kind of even had a remote, up to this year, I've been super excited with the GenCon and the way they deal with us. And that's probably because it was all good. Mm-hmm. And now something sort of stumbled, for me anyway. And so I was a little bit like, oh, really? And for the first time ever, because, the first time we all three of us went to GenCon, we got those passes and we got in early and yippee-yi-yay. The year before that, they didn't offer it. That was Rafe and I, and we didn't get there early enough to make the mad rush. So this was the first year I ever did the big door opening, flood in with humanity thing. And if I don't get in early next year, I will be going away and coming back at around 11, because the worst experience of my Gen Con was the half hour between 10 and 10:30. Where I got flooded into the vendor hall with just thousands of people, and people are bumping you and they're running over you and they're more important than you are. So they're just trying to step on you, and they've got giant backpacks that they forget they have. Or my favorite in a crowd of thousands of people would be a wheeled suitcase at 10 o'clock in the morning. They've got baby carriages. They've got cosplay. So they've got a sword sticking up over their back. And it's ridiculous. It was awful.
Don't do that.
What?
Don't do any of that. So here's what I did. So I knew we weren't going to get those tickets. Now, I also am traveling with 2 small children. So even if I had that ticket, I wouldn't have used it, because my 2 daughters' passes, press passes are limited to 1 per outlet. However, this is one thing I do want to thank Gen Con for. We are grandfathered into the D6 generation. So because we've been press passes so long, they break that rule for us, which is very nice. But that said, I obviously can't get up with the rest of my family, so my girls don't have press passes, so I couldn't have gone in an hour early anyway with my girls. So my plan was never to try to get in there an hour early. My plan was instead, a lot of people may not know this, but the exhibition halls to the side of the vendor hall, which do connect to it by another door, by the way, are open before 10 a.m. So you can go in and you can actually see the Wizards of the Coast main area there. You can see all the gaming tables set up. You can see all the Gale Force 9 games lit up. I was in there taking pictures and looking at the Sons of Anarchy game and components before the vendor hall was even open for the press. So what I was able to do is go that way. We wandered around, took some nice pictures, and then we didn't go to the vendor hall until about 10:15 after the Mad Russ was already in there. So I would say don't try to get into the vendor hall at 10 a.m. unless there is absolutely positively some early purchase you must make, which everybody thinks there is, so that's what they do. But another thing to remember is a lot of the companies, they do sell out on day 1, but a lot of them have a second shipment come in day 2. So many, many companies, including Privateer Press, Gollum Arcana, and other ones would say, we're sold out today, but we're going to get more in tomorrow morning. So come back tomorrow morning first thing. And so because Thursday morning is usually the biggest press other than Saturday, because it's that very first day, that's the worst day to try to do that, I think. So anyway, so we got through the thing. We got the early stuff done. Then we started just seeing the vendor hall. And Craig, why don't you, on our first day here, wander through the vendor hall, most of the first. Now, unfortunately for me, I had a bit of work to do, actual other life work to do in the middle of Thursday. So I was only able to wander around the vendor hall till about 11 o'clock. Then I had to take off, go to a client visit. I wasn't back till like 2 or 3. So middle of my Thursday, chopped out, had to go do real world stuff. My kids and my wife had a run time running around, great time. Then I came back. But Craig, why don't you talk about some of the highlights of the vendor hall? What were some of the day 1 games that sort of caught your fancy, if you will?
Well, once I shook off the unfun of getting in there and I actually went to the Infinity booth, got all the Infinity stuff, and then put it all down because I was so in shock at the crowd and the poor crowd control. So I started walking around and decided, you know what? If I do demos, then I'm nice and focused and nobody's bumping into me. And so I decided to start doing demos. So the first thing I demoed was the game that I knew I was going to demo and not buy, which was Sons of Anarchy.
Oh, no, what'd you think of the demo? I didn't even try the demo because the theme doesn't do anything for me.
Well, the thing was, they knocked it out of the park with Spartacus, and I loved the TV show.
Yes.
They knocked it out of the park with Firefly, and I loved the TV show. I've never even seen a full episode of Sons of Anarchy, so I knew this wasn't going to hit me theme-wise, but I know that I loved their last two games, so I wanted to give it a try, at least see what it was like. And it was great. It was a fun game. It wasn't a super fun demo. There were two of us who were just trying to learn the game and have fun, and one guy was trying to game the system and win the game right off the bat and crush everybody, and so that wasn't too much fun. But the guy running the demo was doing his best to give us all an even playing field. And the guy who wanted to crush everybody didn't win. So that was good. But it wasn't my theme at all. I think running around trying to buy guns and sell drugs and all this stuff doesn't really hit me on any cylinders. But the game mechanics are great. I would say it falls between a Spartacus and a Firefly. Yep. You're trying to do multiple transactions. You're also trying to beat the other guy. You're trying to kill the other guy, beat him down. I think theme-wise, it probably caught the show as well as the other two did. I saw all kinds of characters. You saw all kinds of locations, the way the game is designed. So I really think they probably did a great job with the game. It's not going to be anything I'm going to rush out and play or buy, but I think they did it again if you're into Sons of Anarchy. Now, I think that they seemed to be a little disappointed in the sales, and I think that most people would agree that Spartacus and gamers, huge overlap in those two fan bases. Firefly and gamers, enormous overlap in those two fan bases.
Yep.
Sons of Anarchy and gamers, there's going to be some overlap because Sons of Anarchy is a big, successful show. Not nearly as much of an overlap as the first two, however. So I think that maybe the word of this is going to filter out and it's going to find its audience, but I don't think its core audience was at GenCon.
Right.
But I enjoyed it.
Cool. So, the couple games I demoed early on that day, because it was neat about going into this other hall there were two demos that caught my daughter and I's eye. My youngest daughter was immediately drawn to a game called Black Fleet. And what drew her eye to Black Fleet was the amazing components. So this game has got beautiful artwork board. It's a naval pirate merchant combat / pick up and deliver game. But what's really interesting about it is there's a bunch of plastic boats, two teams of colors. So every player's got pairs of boats, one merchant boat and one pirate ship. And these are cute little plastic boats, great sculpts. And these little boats have, pods in them to hold little cubes so that you can actually put the transported cargo in the little plastic boat. And the merchant boat can hold 3 cubes and the pirate ships can hold 1 cube. And then you've also got, the Navy ships floating around, and we may review this game in the future because it was pretty solid. But what really drew my daughter to this is all the components as well as the nice metal coins. I think her eyes did the same things Craig's did when I first pulled the metal coins out of the box. She's like, "Oh my God, there's a metal!" So looked great. Watched a couple minutes of play, and I knew I wanted to pick this game up. So immediately I was like, I want to pick that one up. The other game we saw in the demo hall there before we got into the main vendor hall was Golem Arcana. So. Going into GenCon, there was a lot of buzz about this game because it's a software / miniature game. It's pre-paints, not collectible, so it avoids two of the pitfalls of prior games that we got into, which is A, it's not random, it's not semi-random, it's not. They're all pre-painted and they're pretty nice looking, and B, the video game implementation of this is really, really solid. It works on an iPad or an Android device. And it comes with a wand. So actually it's a little more interactive than an XLS or whatever. You actually tap the models. And we're going to get more detail later, but basically my oldest daughter, Rose, and I got to play a demo of this game, and we were immediately really, really fascinated by it. And we'd only played the demo for maybe 15 minutes, and we started seeing the layers. She and I are both huge video game fans, but we're also miniature gamers, and the way they did it, they really leveraged things that you could only do in video games and brought them into a miniature war game. It doesn't feel tacked on at all. And the light pen, once you figure out what it's trying to do, works really, really well. So ran out later that day and tried to pick everything up. It turned out they had a GenCon deal where you literally saved like $30 if you got all the factions and everything they made for $120. It's like, well, we're going to do that. But they were sold out that day. But again, if you come back tomorrow, they'll have everything. So I was like, I'm coming back. So I basically had a list by the time I had to leave for work, even before 11 o'clock Thursday morning. I hadn't actually bought anything yet, but I'd already had a list of things I wanted to buy when I came back Friday morning to get. So I'd already built my shopping list, Craig.
There you go.
So what are the games? So those are the two big demos I got. Those are the big games I picked up. The other things that I did get on Thursday was my oldest daughter, of course, was super psyched to go to the Privateer Press booth. She loved it. She got in there. And, of course, the big thing that you could only get at cons on Privateer Press makes pins now for all their stuff. And when I say pins, I mean like Walt Disney World trading level pins, these really nice metal pins with colored enamel that that pin back, like the kind of things you'd see at like Walt Disney World. The only example of it I can think about. And they do pin trading like Disney World. So anybody goes to Disney knows that all the cast members wear their lanyards and their pins, and you can go up to a cast member and say, "I'll trade you Snow White for Stitch." They'll do that. Well, Privateer Press does the same thing now. So when you go into their booth, all of their team members have these lanyards on, and if you see Stryker, who's normally only available in a $25 pin set, you can trade one of your pins for Stryker and get them that way. But also they do now is I picked up the Monsternomicon, which is the new expansion of monster stuff, basically a monster manual for the Iron Kingdoms RPG. And when you did that at GenCon, you got a free cool Wraith pin, pistol Wraith pin. And I also picked up the new Level 7 Invasion. That was sort of sight unseen. I just wanted to get it because I was such a huge fan of Level 7 Omega Protocol. So I picked that up. And that was a good buy at Gen Con also because if you bought that there, they threw in this huge mouse pad style playmat for it. They also threw in some promo cards as well as yet another cool pin. So I got that as well. And that actually turned out to be the only game I did not play at Gen Con that I bought at Gen Con. So that was that was sort of like the impulse purchase. I got no idea how good it is, but I wanted to get it. Game. Everything else I bought, I at least played once before I bought it. So those are my big Thursday purchases, Craig. What else caught your eye on Thursday?
Well, Thursday I did. I also demoed Golem Arcana and thought it was intriguing, but didn't end up buying it.
Yep.
And then we demoed what was it? Star Wars Armada.
Oh, yes. Now everybody's going to know about that.
Yes.
That
Star Wars
fantastic.
Armada is the next step in Fantasy Flight's X-Wing sort of space combat series, but it widens the scope so that you are now playing with capital ships.
It's no longer a dogfight. It's a fleet engagement.
It's not yes. I don't think what I said disagrees with what you just said.
I'm just reinforcing your comments.
Oh, okay. And so, I mean, the immediate comparison, of course, is going to be to Attack Wing, which is capital ships using the exact same rules, basically, as X-Wing. And I would say that just FFG has done it again and has taken the basics and the movement templates and orders that get chosen ahead of time and things like that. And they have expanded it perfectly into the capital ship venue to the point where the Star Destroyer felt like it was more lumbering than the smaller Corvette or the blockade runner, but at the same time it was vastly more powerful. You've got the feeling of shields shifting from one facing to another so that you can distribute the damage that you're taking across a wider front. You do have the fighters because they're in squadrons now.
They look awesome. The little models are fantastic.
They're beautiful. They are the only parts that are unpainted, which understandable because that would be a lot of painting and
just a quick
far
prime
more
and a dry
difficult.
brush, though, and you're good on that.
I think it's more of an inking situation myself, but we're all to the good. But it was amazing. It was utterly, utterly unbelievable. And of course, one of several disappointments of my weekend because it won't be available till Q1 of 2015. But it was phenomenal. And the entire time I felt like there was something weird happening between the guy giving the demo and me. And at the end, he leaned over and very quietly whispered, "I really like your show." I was like, "Oh my God, I really like your game."
It works out.
So it works out perfectly. So hopefully we'll hear from him. Michael, something that sounds like games, but wasn't games. It was like gurneys and gurners, or I don't know. Yeah, he was great. The game is great. I was super excited about that. And that pretty much rounded out my demos for Thursday.
So then, though, Craig,
what did we do? Wait. What did we do Thursday night, though?
That's what I'm saying. Thursday night was huge. It was my second big highlight of the weekend.
Oh, yes.
Because we had set up, so two things we were trying to do. First of all, Dean Gilbert, who is one of the guys who worked on the Firefly RPG along with Nicole, my wife, who also wrote one of the modules that actually she was excited about this too. That little no, we were surprised by this. So Nicole wrote an adventure for the new Firefly RPG, and it was originally published as a PDF. And we thought, and she was a little disappointed. She's like, oh, it's a PDF. But actually at GenCon, they released the actual Firefly Big Damn Heroes book, which is the first expansion for the Firefly RPG, which includes her scenario in print along with a bunch of other folks' scenarios. And it already sold through and doing a second printing, so she was very excited to see that. So that was her first published thing. So she was very excited to run around that book. But in any case, Dean, who also worked on the project, had invited us. He said, I'm happy to GM a Firefly RPG for, Craig and you, Russ, and Nicole. And we also had this deal with our Patreon members for certain backers. Bob Oswald is one of them, who said, if you back this at a certain level, we would love you to come in and play a longer session game with us at Gen Con, just backers at that level. And so it turned out Bob at that level was the only person who could make it to Gen Con. And so we invited Bob to the RPG as well. And Craig, how did that go?
It was a blast. The new system is similar to the old system in a lot of ways, but they've streamlined it, not so much just making it simple, but really sort of pulling a lot of the mechanics out and replacing it with storytelling even more, to the point where the whole thing flows like one big, for me, it was really sort of like the ideal that we strive for, which is like this joint storytelling. Only yes. Here it really, really worked amazingly well, and every mechanic of the game sort of folded into what we were doing, to the point where it was all helping and assisting with the storytelling. It was great.
Yeah, we're probably going to have Dean on the show as a third chair host in the near future, and we'd love to have him on because he was a great guy, really excited, very passionate GM. Really got into the spirit of it and had us on a grand adventure. So we'll probably talk about it more when he comes on the show. But we had an absolute blast. I'm with Craig. I loved how the system worked. I liked how the mechanics of the system worked. Nicole loves RPGs and storytelling, but she's not into the really crunchy RPGs. She likes the sort of, and this is exactly that kind of light, not crunchy, but really more storytelling based situation. I like how combat worked. I like how it flowed. I like how we just sort of, as Craig said, it was like a cooperative story. It was just fantastic. And Dean had a nice, perfectly paced adventure. Lasted exactly 3 hours, which is exactly the kind of time frame you really want at a convention. You don't want a massive, long, all-day thing. You got a lot of things planned, but you want to have a nice, meaty story. And he did. There was really great dramatic moments, nice highlights, nice moments of tension. It was just great. I think all the characters had a really great highlighting moment, had sort of cameo scenes at different spots, or spotlight scenes.
Yeah,
I should say.
Yeah, exactly. Your ideal when you're doing a role playing game and you're kind of like us is that you want to have this big cool story developing and feel like you're part of it and you're shaping it, and you want to have everybody have at least a moment in the sun where they're really shining. And both Dean in particular and this game in general really lends itself. He lends his skills to it, and the game lends itself to that, where everything is sort of broken down into moments where it's going to be up to somebody to do something important. And even if you're not good at fighting, I was playing Wash, so I'm not really good at fighting. The games support this moment where I was like being held down and I needed help, and somebody went to help me, and it turned out that there was a bottle nearby. So I got the bottle and I crashed it on the guy's head, and it was just enough extra to get me out of trouble. It was great. And when you fail, it gives complications that come up later in the story. So it's really just a developing story as you're going over the night's session. It was just really a lot of fun.
It was fantastic. So that was Thursday night. And then did you do anything after that, Craig?
After that, I think I went to bed.
We wrapped that up at about 9:30. I did not. So I had promised.
Yeah. Oh wait, no,
you didn't.
What did I do?
You went and played Artemis with.
Oh, that's what I did. See, I'm telling you, it's a darn good thing we're doing this now. Yeah, go ahead. You say what you were doing.
So I did not go to. So I was torn here. So again, I'm in family mode a little bit. So I was a little worried about this Gen Con for myself. I knew I would have to have a different sort of approach, because normally I go there and I go with Nicole, but she has, her own internet friends too. And so a lot of times it'll be like, hey, honey, I want to go do this weird thing that you're not interested at all. So I'll go do that, and you can go hang out with some of your friends that I don't know either. And it all works out, right? But now with the kids, it's a little different. And my daughter Rose really, really, really wanted to actually play War Machine and Hordes, like in Iron Arena, on those cool tables and with the other gamers. And so I had promised her that after I did this RPG thing, I would take her down there. We would play that. So we went down to the Iron Arena. and she had her miniatures. And the other thing that happened too with Rose that I forgot to mention was that it was her birthday in early August, and one of her birthday presents was, when we go to GenCon, you can go to the Battle Phone booth and you can pick out your own case, because she's been wanting a case now for a while for her miniatures. So we did that too. So my daughter's got her first miniature case. But so then we went to this. So we took her case down full of miniatures, went down to the thing, registered for Iron Arena, got it all set up, and played a game on one of the really, really cool, I tweeted some pictures of it. They just have fantastic, GW Games Day quality miniature tables out there for the Iron Arena. So it's great that, this is one of my favorite parts of what Private Press does for these things. You can go and play on these really awesome tables. You don't need to be in a tournament. It could just be a pickup game with anybody. And then you get points for playing these pickup games. And then you don't have to win. You get points for playing people that aren't from your state. You get points for playing people that are from different parts of the country. You get points for playing different factions. And then you can turn these points in for prizes, like some of those pins I talked about, or a patch, or a poster, or whatever, or a Private Press do-rag, whatever you want. And so it was great fun. So Rose and I played this, and she had a blast. We played 2 games back-to-back. I got a caster kill in her early, but then she came back and beat me on scenario the second time. It was awesome. And while we're doing this, the guy next to me is like, "Oh, are you from the D6 generation?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah." He's like, "Oh, man, I love the show. Are you the writer?" And I'm like, writer? And at first I thought he meant, like, are you the guy that writes the stuff for the show? And I was, no. And then I realized halfway through my response, I'm like, oh, he means, am I the guy that writes the books for WWE? I said, no, I'm Russ. I do the host. He's like, and I guess my voice was a little hoarse, so he didn't recognize it. So I had to do the, hello, welcome to episode. He's like, oh, you're Russ. Okay, great. So so it was really, really, really nice. And so it's, I think more of our listeners sometimes are miniature gamers. So being in the miniature gaming area, we get a lot of recognition. So it was great fun to see them, and had a blast playing my daughter. And it was another one of the highlights is getting to show my daughter, that aspect of the convention. And we were actually out till midnight, she and I, playing this game, and then went back to bed. So that was my evening after having that great game of Firefly. I got to, share GenCon with my daughter playing miniatures, which is just fantastic. So how did Artemis go, Craig?
I almost didn't go. I was tired. I was cranky from the day. I went up to my room. I kind of relaxed for a few minutes. I enjoyed the air conditioning, and then I thought, seriously, I got to go down and check it out. So I went down and I checked it out, and oh my God, was it awesome. I had, we had a crew that was, it was all the Geek Nation tours, basically. Terrace had booked out a giant block of time where the entire Artemis room was his. And so they broke us down into 4 groups. And one thing I will say is I was super excited to get to know, or get to hang out with Garrett Wong a little bit longer than just having him on the show. And I was super excited. I had all these daydreams about just hanging out, playing games and playing Luchador with him. And, that never happened. Cause, because Terrace wants us to spread out and to mingle. And so we all sit in different places. And so I wasn't really, I was like, oh, so I'm like at the very, 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 very bottom of the quote unquote celebrity food chain, and he's at the top, but we're on the same food chain, so we can't sit at the same table. So I was like, oh, that's too bad. But it was amazing. If you haven't played Artemis, I highly recommend it. If you enjoy space opera, you're a bridge crew. So there's a science officer, a weapons officer, a helms officer, a comms officer, and the captain. And everybody's got their role that they have to fulfill. I have played it twice, and it's been very stressful to me. So that was one of the reasons that I almost didn't go. And then I decided to go, and I just pushed for being the comms officer, which is really, remember what Uhuru did, and it's really, really easy. And so I don't look as good in a miniskirt, but there you go. And so it was a blast. And it was funny because they all set you up. You go into your stations, and you have a station. You've got, in most places, you've got like a giant touch screen that's all set and scheduled, and it's set up for your station. Everybody's got their stations, but you can all look, and there's a big giant windscreen at the front, like a giant flat screen TV that's set up like the front of the spaceship. And you're going out there, you're exploring and trying to find the bad guys. And as the communications officer, the sensors and science officer can see whether they're out there, but the communications officer, I have to sort of talk to them and find out if they're good guys or bad guys. I can kind of track them. I'm a little bit better at tracking who's out there, because of my interface. The sensor screen gets really cluttered. All I can see are the communications returns. So I just get a list. So I'm a little bit, it's easier for me to figure out who the bad guys are once we figure out that these like techno mages or somebody, they're not the bad guys. They're kind of like doing their own thing out in the universe. And so it was really, really cool. And we would all get ready to go. And then they would come in and say, the Grand Admiral is trying to decide which quadrant to put you in. I thought they were just, plugging us into the game. And then we were going to basically when you play Artemis at GenCon, you play for like a half-hour session. We ended up playing 4 or 5 half-hour sessions.
Wow,
and so they would. It was amazing. And so they would move you to other ships. So you got other ships and different bridge crews. And so eventually I did get to play with Garrett, which was awesome. And I sat right next to him, which was exciting. And what I found out afterwards is that because they kept saying that Terrace was the Grand Admiral, what I found out later was Terrace really was playing the Grand Admiral, and he had this huge screen that no one else could see. He was actually watching an invasion of space of our quadrant. And he was maneuvering our 4 ships into positions to take out the invaders as they came in. So it was awesome. So it really was like this overarching story was happening over the course of. I eventually did have to leave at like 1 a.m. So they were still playing, but a bunch of us took off. I think at 1, but it was really, really amazing. And getting to do that with all of the listeners, and Geek Nation Tours and having Terrace there. And then, like I said, having that one mission with Garrett, it really lived up to every one of my like fantastical expectations and really kind of put the counterpoint on the whole day. So, the awesomeness of my day totally turned around with the Star Wars Armada, demo, and Michael, the designer, saying that he was he really enjoyed our show, and ended with the whole Artemis thing, and everything in between was amazing. So Thursday really started a little and then really picked up and ended on an awesome note.
Cool. So then Friday, then I woke up Friday morning and I kind of said to the family, look, so the deal was we were all kind of sleeping in most of the weekend, but Friday was the one day I said, I really want us to get in early on Friday because I wanted Golem Arcana. They were already sold out on Thursday. I wanted to get there Friday and get the con deal. And the girls were all excited about it. At this point, Kid had a demo as well, my youngest daughter, and she was excited about it now. So I was like, that's the thing I want to get. And at this point also, my youngest daughter at some point, after seeing all the miniature tables and seeing the gaming, she's been on the fence up at Miniature Wargaming, and that she turned the corner here at Gen Con, and she's like, I want to play this game with you and Rose. I want in. And she wants Everblight. So she wanted an Everblight starter box as well. So that also happened. So now my youngest daughter is also a miniature wargamer. In fact, even as we record this, I am holding the glue together on the Everblight starter box models for her. So she was filing all the bits earlier tonight, so she's all excited. So that happened. So then Friday, so we got up early, got an early start, took the family over to Steak and Shake because, Gen Con. Then went to... and went right in. That was the one day where you actually did fight the surge at 10 a.m. and kind of went in. It was a little rough. It was not as bad as Thursday, but it still was a big surge. Went right to the Golem Arcana. But the nice thing about this is Golem Arcana did sell out, but still not everybody who was going there for the first time Friday knew about it yet. So I was able to get to their booth. It wasn't mobbed. Got the deal, got that. Then took the girls over to Private to Press, got that stuff. Kit got all excited about that. And then my oldest daughter and I started working methodically up and down the rows of the thing. Like, okay, we're going to get through X number of rows today. And we just started going through it. And so most of Thursday was just going through the rows, looking at the cool games, trying demos, and trying whatever wackiness we found. And it was just a great time. I can't remember even all the stuff I demoed on which day, so I won't try here. But most of Thursday until about 11:30, and then I wanted to head over and get ready for our big Play by Mob. So that was the morning getting ready for Play by Mob. Craig, what was your morning on Thursday like?
Well, my morning on Thursday was pretty good because Andy, old Andy, to our longtime listeners, is a bigwig in the business world and actually had access to the executive lounge and the upper floor of the hotel and was like, hey, guys, want to come up for breakfast? Mm-hmm. So sadly, because I was up so late playing Artemis, I got the call like as they were closing up breakfast. So I ran upstairs and got an English muffin. Then I had to go downstairs and I had to write the entire script for Rapid Fire. So that's what I did Friday morning. I finished that up with about maybe a half hour to spare. which was just enough time to load up all my stuff and go to the Crown Plaza through the vendor hall, so that I could at least look at a couple things as I bounced my way through there, and then went to the event.
Yeah, so we did Play by Mob, and that of course is live in an episode coming up, so we won't get into the details of that here, except to say there was a little complexity around getting Play by Mob started this year. Two things. For some reason, they gave us a smaller room than last year. And while they only had 80 tickets online, which is why we sold out so fast, because last year we had a 120-person room, we had a lot of people show up, and we were a little worried we wouldn't fit into the 80-person room. Now, across the hall, there was a 120-person room, or 200-person room, what it was, and there was nobody in it. Meanwhile, the 80-person room we're supposed to be in had someone in it going long. So John Richard, our great sound guy, was helping us out, was like, I think we can take this room across the hall. So Craig was kind enough to run down to the GenCon organizers and say, hey guys, can we go across the hall? Is anybody in our way? And they said, no, it's empty. Go for it. Yep. So we went for it, jumped into the bigger room, happy to have the extra space. We didn't fill it up because we only had 80 people with tickets, but we had about 80 people there. I think it was a good crowd. Had a great time. You'll hear it on the air. The only reason I bring this up is because GenCon goofed up, and when they gave us permission to get into this room, they did not realize they'd forgotten that our show was an hour-and-a-half segment, and they hadn't checked the extra hour-and-a-half. So someone came in thinking they had the room right at 1 o'clock, and we had an extra half an hour, and we just started into the actual Play by Marb segment. So what you may hear when you listen to the Play by Marb segment is the occasional moment where Craig and I sound a little distracted, which is basically us trying to make hand signals to these guys trying to get us out of the room.
Right. Who are giving very rude, wrap-it-up signals.
So we dispatched Ace, Indianapolis local John Richard and expert sound guy to deal with them while we tried to record. And we did. He did a great job. GenCon was awesome about it. They're like, look, it was our fault. They found another accommodation for that group, got it all squared away. But at this point, we're a little confused.
A little frazzled.
And we weren't sure how much time we had, so we actually cut the Play by Mob off probably a little earlier than we had to, and didn't get to all of our material. So if it sounds a little weird in the middle and we sound a little distracted, that's what happened. So next year, I think we want to, I've talked to Craig about this a little bit, a couple things about Play by Mob that make it challenging. One, it's during the middle of the day during the vendor hall, which I don't love because A, I'm missing on a vendor hall. B, I know a lot of our listeners don't want to go to the vendor hall. And second problem is it's literally right against the Fantasy Flight Flight Report, which I know a lot of folks want to go to. I know for a fact that some of our fellow podcast hosts would love to come to our thing, but they don't, specifically because they have to cover the flight report. So I think next year, Craig, we should consider moving it to the evening on one of those days and getting us out of the vendor hall conflict. So I think we'll get better attendance. Just saying.
Yeah. No, I think that's
so we might try that next year. Try to get a bigger room and maybe a room not so far away because that was really
kind
far
of
haul.
stinky.
So anywho, went great though. Listeners were fantastic. Thanks to everyone who came to the Play by Mob. You were all awesome. All great sports as always. Hilarity did ensue. I don't know that we ever rose to the level of Stephen Hawking, but it was a pretty good year.
I'm okay with that.
But good times were had by that. And then after the Play by Mob, I kind of went back to perusing the vendor hall. Craig, how about you?
You actually didn't go back to perusing the vendor hall. You went to lunch, I went to interview Matt Wilson.
That's right. I forgot about that. So we were also committed to interview Matt Wilson, but then due to my family commitments and my poor kids being really, really good sports, sitting through the whole thing, I couldn't do that to him again. So I left the interview in the capable hands of Rafe and Craig. And I went off to have lunch with my family and also John Richard to thank him for doing all the great audio recording for us.
Absolutely. And so it was Russ, totally understandable, and everybody understood it. And I do believe Matt Wilson poked some friendly fun at Russ over the course of the recording.
I haven't heard it yet. I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah. But it was all in good fun. But the sad thing for Russ is that this year is the first year we've ever sat down with Matt Wilson, and he didn't have to immediately rush off to something else.
Oh man!
So not only did we get to sit and talk with him for over an hour, which was a blast, and he was really forthcoming and just relax. He gets very relaxed around us for some reason. I don't know. He's drinking Red Bull all the time too, so I don't know if that that shouldn't be relaxing. But it's just a blast. We chat, we talk about all kinds of different stuff. And then for the first time ever, when we stopped recording, he was like, so what do you guys want to talk about? Cause I don't have anywhere to be. We literally stayed for at least another half hour, 45 minutes talking about game design and just the industry in general and what we like and what we play. And it was just really, really an awesome, yet another, a celebrity moment for me in GenCon. And then when that was over, I went back to my room and dumped all my stuff off. By the time I got back to the vendor hall, it was like around 6. No, it wasn't 6. It was like 5. So I had like an hour, and I ran around, and I looked at all of the Fantasy Flight stuff.
Yep.
Because we always miss the Fantasy Flight report.
Right.
And so I wanted to go see the new X-Wing stuff. I wanted to see the new the display of Armada, and of course
Star Wars Assault,
aka Star Wars Descent,
which is freaking brilliant. Fantasy
amazing.
Flight. Just shut up and take my money, please.
Exactly.
Just you have it all.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm sure we'll talk more about that in the main show, but and I'm sure you've seen all the pictures on the internet by now. OMG, they nailed it. I can't wait. I watched the demo of it. I got to play a little bit of a demo. Really, really good. It's obviously not out yet, but it just really hits the mark, and I think it'll be great. So, who doesn't want to play a Wookiee? Let's be honest.
That's true. Very true. So after that was my True Dungeon run.
Oh yeah, you did
with
that
a bunch of our locals. Yeah, we did that again this year.
I didn't do True Dungeon this year because of the family. What did you think?
It was pretty amazing, actually. The technology was really kicked up several notches. One of the puzzles was a giant sand table full of eggs, and the eggs were glowing. And there was a magic wand, and when you touched an egg with the magic wand, the eggs around it changed colors in a different pattern. And the puzzle was, how do you get all the eggs to be a certain color? And there were clues that you had to find in the room as to what color you were looking for. And then you had to figure out what order in which to tap the different eggs to make them all the same color. And they were literally glowing from the inside. It was pretty amazing.
That's cool.
And then there's I'll just talk about one other room really quickly where there was a giant sand table that had sand up to probably about 6 inches. And there were a bunch of glyphs around the room. And what basically had to happen was you had to form the rune in the sand. There was a plastic prop knife there. You had to pretend to cut your hand, put your hand over the table, and if you had cut it and put it over the table, I should say, as you dig the sand out, water, it's digital, so it's not really water, but blue color starts to seep up into the recesses of the design you carved into the table. And then when you pretend to cut your hand and put your hand over it, blood starts to drip throughout the table and turn the blue red.
That's awesome.
It was insane. And there was a certain order of operation that you had to follow. And so eventually we figured it out. But I mean, that's just an idea of the technology level. It was awesome. And then the second to the last room was a Medusa. So she walked into the room all hissy in like a really nice looking dress. And 4 of us were like, oh, you're all stoned. I was not stoned, thankfully. But every time you try to hit her in hand to hand with air hockey, the shuffleboard combat mechanic, you had to roll to save against petrification, and I eventually got turned to stone that way. So it was very funny because the last room, we had one guy left, Greg Ivany. And everybody else was either dead because she did 18 points of damage every time she hit you. So everybody else was either dead or stone. He was all alone in the room, and this was the puzzle run. So there were hints in every room.
Right.
And we had divided it up like everybody's job was to remember a couple of rooms. So we were dead, so we couldn't talk to him. So he was like, okay, guys, I can't remember any of the things that we saw. So we eventually got killed in the last room, but it was fun.
Good.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, $42, and it didn't seem to last as long as it did last year, but we had fun. We had a good time.
Yeah. I'm glad you did. I heard mixed reviews about it this year, so I'm glad your run was cool.
Yeah. No, it was cool. Yeah, I mean, for a TPK.
Good. Well, hey, that happens though.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So my Friday night was I hung out so our group sort of found a spot sort of in the open hall there between areas B and C, right in the middle there, in this giant red shirt that was hanging from the thing. So we started meeting there. We met there Friday night and also Saturday night for gaming. And so Friday night, of course, now everybody's made some purchases. We set the kids up. Actually, I set the girls up with Gollum Arcana up in the room. So they're all ready to play Gollum Arcana all night. Okay, you girls are all sit here. I'm going to go downstairs and hang out with some of my friends. And you got to go to bed by 10, and they're really good about that. So we went down, and I went down, and Nicole did too. And we played with some of our friends of the show, Adam and his wife and Nicole play with them. I ended up playing Dead of Winter with Jeremy, a local gamer Jeremy. And Dead of Winter, as you may know, Craig, is the new game from Plat Hat Games, and it is a zombie game, but it's a semi-co-op zombie game with a trader mechanic.
Yeah, nice.
So basically what it is you're not playing one hero. You actually are working together. All the members of the players are working in this zombie, human community living in a zombie-infested world. So you've got this base. You're inside of some kind of semi-fortified location, a prison or whatever you're in, and there's a town locations outside the prison, and this is mostly driven by cards, but there's also a board. And then there's all these little cutout standees, and they represent the different survivors. But the thing is, you command a group of survivors. So basically, you don't command one guy. You command a faction within inside the compound. So I might command a faction with 4 or 5 people in it. You might command a faction with 4 or 5 different people in it. They've all got their own abilities. They've all got their own equipment. You're equipping with them and leveling them up. But then I'm going to do is I might have a secret objective. We all have an objective to eventually survive the zombies. But then you have a sub-objective that even if you're a good guy, you have a sub-objective, but then you also might have an objective that's in a traitor and you want the zombies to win. So there's different levels of that going on. And then you have to venture out into the town to gather supplies and gather things back for the community. So it's really interesting. I like the sub-objectives to also win. So basically what happens is if you're a good guy and the game wins, you only win if the game wins and one of your bonus objectives are completed. So mine was to have at least one character equipped with at least 2 books. So if I did that, then I would win when the humans won. But then some way out there's a traitor who he only wins if the zombies win. The cool thing with the traitor is there's not always, it's like Shadows over Camelot. There's not always a traitor dealt out. So you don't really know if there's a traitor.
Right.
But because everybody's got their own sub-objectives, sometimes since I need 2 books, I might go to a place in town where it makes no sense to go. There's no tactical reason for anybody to be there. The zombies aren't really threatening us from there. We really need to clear out the schoolhouse. What are you doing in the library? Right? I'm in the library trying to get my books. So that was sort of so it's kind of neat. And Matt actually did that. One of our local friends did that because actually he's no longer local. He's one of our old local friends that now lives in a different state. He was going in to do this to find his objective. It looked totally wacky to me. Jeremy was actually the traitor. Jeremy looked at me like, what the hell's Matt doing? And then immediately I figured Matt was a traitor. So Jeremy voted Matt out. I backed him up. We voted Matt out, made him an exile, which kind of like Battlestar, you can still do stuff, but now you've been outed as a bad guy. Right. But then he reveals his card. He's not a bad guy, so we lose morale, but we were in a good enough position to still win. So humans won that one, worked great. So that was a lot of fun. So ended up playing 2 zombie games this weekend, more about the other one on Saturday. But yeah, Dead of Winter was a lot of fun.
Cool.
So it went to bed probably about midnight on Friday. So that was our Friday. And then Saturday. So Saturday's the last big day of the con because Craig and I, both of us were driving back. Both of us usually leave pretty early on Sunday.
Yep.
So Saturday was the last big day. So you're trying to get as much as you can in, kind of feeling like it's the last day, but also it's the most crowded day of the weekend in the vendor hall. Yeah. So you're not really thinking that's where you want to be all day, but you can't help just not going there again because stuff. So what did you do Saturday, Craig?
I spent all day in the vendor hall.
Exactly right.
Yep. So Andy is a very regimented person.
Yep.
I wouldn't say he has OCD, but he's close. And so he was like, well, I'm going to do like the vendor hall front to back and do everything. So if you want to come with me. So I went with him and it was awesome. So I know now that I saw almost everything. I missed, did you even know? I didn't know until later on after everything had closed and we were on our way home going through the book that Conquistador Games was there.
I did not.
I did not know that either.
You'd think we know that.
Yeah, you'd think we would. You'd think somebody would have told us.
I did not, although a friend of mine did say, hey, yeah, I picked up the new Science. And I was like, oh, great, I love that game. And I'm like, I just assumed he picked up at one of the random, booths that sell random games.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was actually.
So that was good. We walked around. We did some demos. I can't remember most of it, but we demoed. I thought I had found my game of the convention. Mm-hmm. I thought this is it because I hadn't bought literally. I had spent maybe $50. I picked up some awesome stuff. Oh, I demoed Mars Attacks.
Oh, did you? What'd you think?
Romantic. I thought it's a watered down version of Dead Zone.
Oh, nothing wrong with that.
So if you like Dead Zone, but you think it's a little too deep, then Mars Attacks is for you. But it's supposed to be. Everything about it is kind of wacky, cartoony, over the top, just like the IP that it comes from. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of fun. The terrain is very similar, except that it's ruined brick buildings instead of sci-fi.
Right.
So it looks very cool. They didn't have any in when I demoed it, or I might have actually bought it. But They got him in on Friday or Saturday, and I didn't end up going back, but that was fun. So we're walking around and on Saturday, and I see this game, and it looks basically like the arena from Spartacus, except that it's surrounded by a star field.
Ooh.
And it's got giant mechs instead of gladiators.
Well, that sounds like Win.
And I went, hey, can I do a demo here? And they were like, oh, absolutely. Would love to have to do a demo. Okay. So setting this, the game is called Deus Machina. And it is these giant fighting gladiator robots, on this giant hex-based arena. The models were painted awesomely. They were in kind of an urban camouflage. They had removable weapons. They had removable heads. They had all kinds of different torsos. There are walls that have like caterpillar treads on them, so they can move around the board and change the way the board is. There's giant sentry guns. I mean, it was really amazing. The only bad thing I would say is for a demo, they showed me too much of the game, because basically the game, there's a long pre-game element where you have to build your mech from the ground up, and you have a skeleton, and it's all cards. So you have a head card, a torso card, 2 arm cards, and a legs card. And you then you get dealt upgrade cards and weapon cards, and there's a mechanic where you're building out and you're replacing certain things and building other things. And that's how you build your mech. And then there's this element where you can trade in cards for money, and there's all kinds of either intrigue or cheating that you can do with the money that you get. So there's all kinds of stuff we didn't do, but it took a long time, like 15 minutes, to build out my mech. And then the other guy who was giving me the demo built out his mech, and we played. It's a very simple combat mechanic, but it was a lot of fun. And I was like, I'm going to buy this. So how much is it? And they were like, oh, we're going to kickstart it in 2 months.
Oh, no.
And I went, no. So I don't even know if it's going to exist. Never mind if it's going to have all this cool stuff. But it was amazing. So in a month or 2, expect me to talk about Deus Machina, the Kickstarter.
Nice.
So that was my big thing. And I did spend an awful lot of time at the Wild West Exodus booth with Sean and Aaron on Saturday as well. So that was a lot of fun.
Very cool.
Signed some books and talked to some folks and watched a professional painter paint, because it was crazy. He's painting these models, these regular, tabletop models, with what looks to be giant Walmart brushes. That he's just like jabbing at their face, and it's coming like out beautifully. It was like, I'm like, oh God,
how do they do that? I'm
so not you. But that was a lot of fun too. So that was, and I still hadn't bought anything. By the end of Saturday, we had our hour-long stint in the Dice Tower booth from 5 to 6. So I knew if I was going to do any buying, it had to be by 5. And ultimately, I went to the War Store. And I spent $80 on resin bases for my cost neutral pre-Heresy Marine Army.
Oh, okay.
Which is no longer cost neutral. I was building it out of bits that I've had for 1,000 years. I thought, I figured it all out. I can do like a 2,000 point Marine Army without buying anything. Well, now I'm $80 down on bases.
Nice.
But they're cool looking bases though. And then I was like, oh, you know what? I've got all of this Dwarven Forge stuff, and they came out last year. They had no Dwarven Forge stuff to buy because they hadn't fulfilled their first Kickstarter yet, and they didn't have any resin with them.
Hey, you know you're a big customer of Dwarven Forge. When I walk by the booth and he's like, "Hey, D6G, your co-host is our number 1 customer."
Yeah, see, that's
Like,
and
I think he funded your Kickstarter at the maximum level.
Yeah, I there was a lot of money in there. Yeah. There many people were beyond me, but there were a lot.
But it's the fact that he knew you. I mean,
well, Jeff he's a listener.
I know,
actually, to the point where he goes to our event every year also.
Right.
But he's awesome. But so they have these new catacomb sets, and it's like the dungeon sets that I already have, but they're catacomb sets, so they're niches full of bones and like columns of skulls, and they have this new thing where they've got LEDs plugged into the pieces that flicker.
Yeah.
So you've got like
those.
giant.
They're awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's awesome. So I eventually went over there and spent $250 on some more Dwarven
Toledo
Forge stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, I use the stuff I've got so often.
And yeah, exactly.
I mean, seriously, I
see it
need
out
more
every weekend, right? Yeah, you got
yeah, exactly.
Sure.
So that's what I did up until 5. How about yourself?
Well, so as we mentioned, Saturday is so mobbed in the vendor hall that unless you're Craig, you try to avoid it. So what I had not done at this point was beyond the vendor hall. I mentioned that I went to these larger rooms where each company has like big areas where they usually hold tournaments or large demos, and the Wizards of the Coast is there, and of course they're out there with D&D Next. Although I didn't really spend a lot of time with D&D Next. I thought I would, but I just didn't. But a couple things that we really wanted, my kids and I wanted to check out. My family did. One of them was there's this new game out called Ordis Regni, and it was, if you look, as part of the swag, there was this sort of satchel bag they gave out at GenCon, this weird medieval artwork on it. And then as you walked around GenCon everywhere, there's these giant O's with this castle silhouette in the O with arrows pointing to this one room. And outside the vendor hall, there's this giant room where they're demoing this game, Ordis Regni. So we're like, we got to check this out. I mean, it's obviously someone's backing them with some serious money if they're doing that much sponsorship at GenCon. So I went and checked it out. And we got there early on Saturday. It was actually the first place we went to on Saturday. Instead of going to the vendor hall, everybody else was. We went right to this little area. So it was this, they had just opened up. There was nobody there. So we got to sit at a demo table, just my family, my 2 kids and my wife. And I said, this is a complicated game. You know, you think my kids can handle it. And they said, well, if they've been gamers a long time, maybe there's some things you're going to have to learn. And, you know, there's some depth to it. And she holds up the rule books, probably like 20 pages in small print. I'm like, oh, well, my kids are gamers, but still, this looks kind of heavy. Oh, well, we're here. Let's try the demo. So she's explaining the demo, and it's an interesting game, beautiful artwork, and basically it's sort of it is a card-driven game, but it's not a deck-building game. It's only deck-building in that you can adjust what's in your deck before the game starts. But once you're in the game, there's no deck-building. You have a deck of cards you draw from, you play from your hand. But what's interesting about it is you're sort of building on the table your little kingdom. You're building out your castle. You're probably putting a prince or a lord in there. If you can get a field out there, then maybe you can start to levy an army and have them standing in the field, or you can get a farm out there, you get a cathedral out there, you can win political votes. If you play a banner, you can call a joust and have a jousting match where people can ante up and ante up their own kingdoms, and you can try to win them from them. But if you have a prince, you can play a knight. So it's all these little complicated things. And at first I'm like, oh, my kids are never going to get this. And all of a sudden, Kit's like, take this, Rose, whack. And the person teaches like, boy, there's no love lost between sisters. And Rose is like, oh, yeah, I can't take this, whack. And they're like, they just totally figured it out. They're like destroying each other. And Nicole's like, I think I have to get this game. She was really digging it too. So we picked it up. It's a beautiful game. It's one of those games that, even though it's a card game and it's a pure card game, it comes with tons of amazing components. It comes with these really cool wooden card holders. It comes with all these nice little rounded wooden pieces for marking different things in the game on the cards. And it's just beautiful art. In fact, there's no text on the cards at all. In the demo, in the learning game, there's text on the cards for learning the game the first time, but after that, it's all done with pictures. And then the way you can remember what the cards do is you either remember them, but also in the game, there's actual cloth reference sheets. So you can unfold this cloth sheet, and printed on it is the references for each card, almost like it's an old English, old medieval cloth or tapestry. But then also there's an app you can download for free that you point at the card and it tells you what the card does. It scans the image of the card and does it, which is pretty cool. So really, really fan stuff. And I looked at this, and the core game's for 2 players. You have to buy an expansion to add 2 more players, and they all come with these cool wooden bits. And I'm looking at this like, well, each of these boxes is going to be like $80 to $100 because there's so much wood in there and stuff. But at the special at GenCon, it was $45 a box. So we got the core set and the expansion for $90. I thought it was a great deal for what you got in there, and I'm really looking forward. This is the kind of game you can play with your family, but you can also play with like non-gamer friends. It's one of those beautiful, just really nice looking games on the table. I'm really excited about it. So it's probably one of the prettier games I own in terms of just like production value. So and not being like the classic plastic lots of little bits, very elegant. So yeah, I was really impressed with that one. Ordis Regni. That was one of the ones that I really Regini. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, me neither.
A lot of letters. The only problem with this game is the name is awful because I don't know how to pronounce it and I can't spell it. So I'm trying to tweet it. I don't even know how to spell it. I can't remember how to spell it. I can't remember the phonics of it.
Yeah, the box was very strange from a product positioning standpoint also. It's like a blank black box with medieval artwork on it, and that's it.
Well, what's neat about it is it actually is doing art over function or even marketing. It's like totally an art project. So it's really neat that way. So I really liked it. I know our friends at Ahern's tried it out on Sunday. They also fell in love with it. I don't think it's for everyone. It's definitely a certain kind of game, but I liked it a lot. So that was the one. The other thing we tried was that we just checked other things out that Saturday. So we also went to the painting competition upstairs in GenCon, which is outside again the vendor hall. Saw the speed painting. My daughters are, now that they've both been trying their hands at painting a little bit, they were amazed by the painting level of those people. They really got into it because they've tried it before now. They really can appreciate some of the talent going on there. So that was fun to share that with them. Then we went to also some of the vendors have their own little rooms where you can go try their games. And we went to Yellow's room, the guys that make King of Tokyo. But we weren't interested in King of Tokyo. They had a sign up with all these little barnyard animals on them. My youngest daughter was like, "Ooh, Dad, those cute little animals. Let's go try the game out." And the game is not new. It's been around for a while. It's called Fun Farm. Have you heard of this game, Craig?
No.
Okay, so Fun Farm is a little affordable game. It's not much in the box. You basically get 6 round, about the size of a baseball, 6 animals. And they're Nerf, though, so they're squishy, and they're very cute. So you got a little rounded pig, you got a little rounded horse, you got a little rounded cow. You get 6 of these different animals, and you set them up in a circle on the table, and you have your family of 4 sitting there. There's also a deck of cards, and there's 2 dice, a black die and a white die. On each side of the black die and white die, they're different colored dots. One big orange dot on one side, big black dot on the other side, big blue dot. And what you do is, one player flips a card over and puts it in the middle of the circle of the animals, and it'll show one of the animals on there, like the horse, and it'll show 2 of the dice different colors, like black die with orange and white die with blue. And then you roll the dice. If either of the dice displayed on the cards comes up that side, you can immediately, as fast as you can, grab one of these animals. And if you do grab the animal before anybody else does, you get to take the card and put it in front of you, and you scored. If the dice don't match the card, then you leave the card in the middle. The next player goes, and they flip over another card, and they roll the dice. And now, if the dice come up matching any cards in the middle, whether you've got the horse card in the middle or the pig card in the middle, you can grab either or both of those animals. So you can only grab one, but I could grab the horse and my daughter could grab the pig, and we both score if both those cards are up and the dice that roll match them. This gets very, very hectic and crazy very quickly, and the way the colors work, it actually takes a moment to think and find the right matches. And so there's this tension. It's almost like Hex when you grab them for those sticks. And, of course, you grab for them, and animals shoot everywhere, and Nerfs flying all over the place, and it's really silly fun. Great family game. It's one of those games that's far, far more fun than it has any right to be. It was a lot of fun, so we picked that up as well. That is Fun Farm. Also in that room were some other cool games. King of Tokyo was there. Another game, Steam Park, which I did not get, but a lot of our friends picked it up, which is this sort of theme park roller coaster builder, but in a steampunk world where you're building a theme park with roller coasters and different rides, and then little wooden robots come and ride on your rides. And I didn't get a chance to play it, but components look cool. I tried it with my kids. They didn't like the artwork. They thought it was a little too creepy, so they didn't get into it. But I'm interested in trying that one. I know a couple of our friends brought that one home, so that also looked pretty interesting to me. So that's what we did most of Saturday. We did go in the vendor hall a little bit, but most of Saturday was spent going around the different external things inside the convention center and seeing the other companies and what they had set up and trying their games out as well until the evening time came. Right, Craig?
Yes.
So we had we did manage to man the Dice Tower booth for about an hour from 5 to 6. That was a great time. We had a lot of listeners come by. Not a huge count. I think everybody's trying to make their last minute purchases on Saturday.
Yeah, it's not a great time.
But it was fun to hang out with Tom and other folks at Dice Tower Network. I expected to just be Craig and us, but it's actually great. Some of the other Dice Tower folks were there too, so it was always fun to chat with them as well. We played a little Luchador with some folks. We poked a little fun at Tom because apparently he doesn't like Luchador at all. So it was fun to poke fun
apparently
at him.
He hates it.
Apparently, so that was kind of hilarious.
So we made him wear the Luchador mask that Phil brought me.
There may be pictures.
And took pictures.
Yeah, there may be pictures of that as well. So that's our fault. Our bad.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much Saturday during the day. And then Saturday night being the last night of the weekend, we figured, well, we better get some more gaming in, right, Craig? So that was the one night you and I actually hung out in the evening together. Besides
that is true.
So we went to our little spot there between the B booth, the B hall, and the C hall, and we hung out and we played. What did we play? We played Black Fleet together.
We played Black Fleet, then we played Student Bodies.
Student Bodies, which was so this is the other zombie game of the con. I would say this is Kurt Covert's latest adventure, some Smirk and Dagger. He's talked about on the show last time he was on here. And this is the one where you have no weapons. You are a student in a high school, and the zombies are invading. This is not a co-op. You can't really stop the zombies. What you're trying to do is get the antidote. You've already been bitten. So at the start of the game, everybody's been bitten. So now it's a race against time. You are trying to get the antidote and get out of the school. And your goal here is to not let the other players do that. If they die, though, they become a zombie, and then they can actually try to stop you as well. So actually, your win condition changes throughout the game, but you're never allies. There's no point when there's anybody working together. You're always trying to. So there's a lot of backstabbing, a lot of that very much smirk and dagger. I'm gonna just totally screw you right now, Craig, and do this to you. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a blast.
Actually, it was good. And what's great about that too is we get to play that with two of our listeners as well.
Yep.
Phil hung out with us. Phil played both in Black Fleet and that one, and then Dave, right? Dave from who is not Swiss but lives in Switzerland.
Yes, he's an Englishman from. Is it Switzerland or yes? Because the Swedish chef. The Swedish chef joke.
He did the Swedish chef last year. At
that's
GenCon
right. That's right. Because at the event, he said he lived in Switzerland, and Rafe said, I could tell by your accent."
right. So that was Saturday. Any other highlights from Saturday for you, Craig?
No, that was it. We went home and we went back to the room, and Dave and I actually packed that night. So we didn't go to bed till 2.
Yeah.
But we had all our stuff packed and ready to go so we could leave the next morning.
Yeah, I was up to about 1 gaming, and then I came back to the room and crashed, and the family got up at a leisurely pace. We packed up nicely in the morning, went downstairs for breakfast in the hotel, and managed to run into Terrace having breakfast for the last day too. So it was great to say goodbye to him. And then we took off, and that was pretty much GenCon. And I don't know, Craig, how did you feel about GenCon? We got about 5 minutes left. What was your final thoughts on GenCon this year? Better, worse, same? Did it feel too crowded?
It was really busy.
Yep.
And I was really overcommitted.
Yeah.
So I think next year I shall have to say no to more people. Mm-hmm. And I shall have to plan my days out a little more carefully, knowing that it's just going to be super crowded. So I need to get down there early for a press pass, so I can get there early and go through the hall to get my bearings before the press of humanity enters. And I think it'll be good. It was amazing. Some of the best stuff that's ever happened to me at GenCon happened this year. It was just so crowded, and the older I get, the more uncomfortable I get in crowds. So. I need to, I think I need to plan more knowing that in the future. What about you?
Well, for me, it was a landmark GenCon because the first time my kids ever went. So I was seeing GenCon through their eyes, and my biggest fear was that 2 things. 1, they wouldn't like it at all, or 2, they would like it, but after a day they'd have been done. I've seen everything I want to see. I don't care anymore. And we usually take them. We have taken them to PAX East, but we usually take them on Sunday when it's family day, and we just take them for 1 day. Now, PAX is a lot smaller. Even though PAX attendance is larger than GenCon, it's actually a much smaller footprint, less going on there than at GenCon. So I was nervous about that, but that was not the case. Day 2, they were just as pumped as day 1. They couldn't wait to get back down there. They couldn't wait to play more games. By the end of Saturday, halfway through, can't wait for next year. We're coming with you next year, right, Dad? You're not going to leave us at home. They loved it. They loved every minute of it. They loved everything about it. They loved getting the games. They loved seeing all the games. They loved playing in demos. They loved staying up late and playing. They just had a blast. They can't wait for next year. So it was a complete win, and it was so much fun to see it through their eyes and see all that stuff. So I was really pleased with it. It was definitely more crowded, but I don't know that it was orders of magnitude worse than last year. And I'm not saying you're saying that either, but some people did say, I did see some posts online like, it's getting too big. One thing I forgot to mention too is we did go to the cosplay parade on Saturday afternoon, the 3:00 parade there. Had a blast with that too. Saw 2 of our local friends, Jeremy and Megan, are fantastic cosplayers. Like they could do competitively. They're really, really good. And they went as a couple of War Machine characters, Menoth Bastion in armor, and then Kaya from Circle of Oribos, and they were fantastic. They look great, but the whole parade was really cool, and it was kind of fun. There was like one point in the parade, they grouped the different costumes together. So at one point there were 3 Deadpools doing leapfrog with each other, which was kind of hilarious. And then there was another point where about 10 Elsas from Frozen came by, and the parade stopped in front of us for whatever reason, and they all broke into really actually pretty well synchronized Let It Go, the song, which was
very
kind of
nice.
fun. So it was really fun. The kids enjoyed that as well. They thought that was cool also. So we had just a great time, and my spirits are in no way dampened for next year. I can't wait. And like you said, Craig, there were some great announcements this year. The games were just as good as ever. So I'm pumped, and I had a great time. So I would say keep it going, GenCon. You're getting bigger, but you're still just as good as ever.
There you go.
All right.
Now let's get the heck out of Dodge, because now I'm sick of Dunkin' Donuts.
All right.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.